I woke up to the kind of quiet that makes you feel like the day owes you something. Owl feathers drifting somewhere in the treeline, water lying flat as slate. Then my phone lit up with a subject line that didn't just ruin my coffee. It put a brick in my throat. Cedar Hollow Community Day waterfront access confirmed. My address sat in the first line like a dare, like someone had already rolled out a red carpet across my driveway. I stared out at my dock-me posts, my rope, my little solar light that flickers when a night heron lands, and I knew in 3 heartbeats the fight had already started. See, I'm not the kind of person who stirs up trouble. I do my paperwork, I keep records, I pay for the things I use, and I leave the woods better than I found them. And this spring I'd been running an acoustic survey at the waterline midnight to dawn, counting owl calls by frequency patterns on a handheld recorder, logging their nest routes, and I'd spent too many cold hours in a camp chair to let 100 strangers tromp through here like it was a public park, not to mention my septic permit tops out at 12 people before you even get to the words "fine schedule." So I knew the stakes weren't just about privacy. They were about science and money and the small simple rule that if you don't own something, you don't promise it to other people. I opened the attachment, and there it was, a hand-drawn map with my gate marked as main entrance, my dock labeled stage area, and a box that said overflow parking along Ridge Road, which is funny because Ridge Road is a single lane, and the only thing that fits there in overflow is poison ivy. Then I saw a scanned contract naming venue, Bennett Waterfront, and I felt my jaw climb up behind my ears because my last name is Bennett. Yes, but the signature wasn't mine, and the HOA that stamped their little logo on the footer doesn't even cover my parcel. Never has. Me lot sits in Riverton County, Section C, exempted when the developer haggled the original plat. And the first lesson every neighbor learns out here is that the invisible line matters. June shuffled into the kitchen wearing my old flannel, the one with a tear at the elbow, and just breathed out, "Tell me that's a phishing email." And I said I wished it were, because at least with phishing you can blame the ocean. We set the phone on the table between us like a live beetle, neither of us wanting to touch it again. And then I exhaled and did the thing I'm good at. I went to the basement, pulled the fireproof box, and brought up the stack of papers that tell the story a map can't argue with. Deed, survey, title report with the easements circled, the wetland buffer letter, the septic capacity in its tidy little bureaucratic font. I lined them up with a ruler edge, photographed every page, named the files like I was building a court case: 01_deed, 02_survey, 03_title, 04_buffer, and slid them into a folder called facts, because sometimes the only thing you can hold on to is the spine of a word that heavy. I called the county clerk and asked about event permits on private land, and she said, slow enough to make it land, that no one can convert a residence into a public venue without the owner's written consent, that any gathering over a dozen needs sanitation measures and traffic plans, that enforcement can be fast when documentation is clear, and the way she said, document everything, made me picture a flashlight beam cutting a dark attic. Steady, polite, not asking for drama, just asking for proof. I called the environmental office and spoke to a ranger named Keegan who said he knew my shoreline, said he admired the owl work, said if I needed him he'd swing by to confirm the buffer lines on event day. And right then my shoulders dropped, just half an inch, because it's something, you know, having one person in a uniform who says your name like it belongs. By noon, the neighborhood page had screenshots flying. Marla says the Bennetts offered the dock, family-friendly community day, bring coolers, and in every photo the little HOA badge sat like a crown at the top of the post. Marla Denton, HOA president, is the kind of person who stands with her feet too close together and her chin too high, like gravity owes her a favor, and I guess she figured what was mine was hers if she said it on the internet long enough. Our neighbor across the cove, Toby Hale, texted me the RSVP thread and added, "You want me to fly the drone tomorrow, get a record?" And I said yes, please, because a bird's eye view of a bad idea is sometimes the best way to teach it to fly away. While I was at the hardware store buying a length of chain and a padlock that looked like it could anchor a tugboat, I ran into Rex Wilcox, Marla's shadow, the board member who never says much in meetings but loves to deliver little messages on porches. He gave me a smile you could cut lettuce with and said, "Heard you're hosting the neighborhood. Evan, nice of you to finally be a team player." And I told him straight, not hosting, not consenting, not inside your lines. And he did that chuckle men do when they want you to know they have a plan. You'll want to be reasonable, he said. It's good optics. And I stepped closer, took in the smell of mint gum and something sharper, and said, optics are for cameras. Rex, this is about property. He leaned in, brought his voice down. Marla already paid vendors. You don't want to make her look like a liar. I let that sit. How easily he admitted the thing he thought would scare me. I nodded, once, like I was measuring a board, and said, tell Marla to bring her checkbook and her attorney to my gate. In that order. Then I bought the chain, paid cash, and walked out before he could stitch another sentence. The emails started next soft at first, then hard. Hi Evan, perhaps a misunderstanding. Hi Evan, community goodwill. Evan, you don't want to be remembered as the guy who shut the lake to children. And I had to set the phone down because I could feel the hook in that last line. They always reach for the same lever, the same easy moral stage, and they always forget the simple math of a septic system and a shoreline buffer, the things that don't care about your story. I typed a single reply and CC'd the board and the sheriff. No permission has been granted. This parcel is not within HOA jurisdiction. Any attempt to enter constitutes trespass. Attached are deed, survey, buffer letter, and septic permit. A chain and lock will be installed at 0600. If you have questions, direct them to my attorney. June and I spent the evening printing the documents on heavy paper, sliding them into plastic sleeves, laying out zip ties like we were prepping for a field surgery. She didn't say much, just kept her hand on my back when she passed by, and now and then we'd catch each other's eyes and laugh for no good reason, because that's what happens when you're standing in your own kitchen turning into the kind of person who needs to laminate the truth. Around midnight, I walked the dock with my recorder, caught a barred owl asking who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? And let the question float back to the dark side of the cove where Marla's house lights make the water look expensive. At dawn, the gravel crackled under my boots. The mist wore the road like a scarf, and I fed the chain through the gate posts and clicked the lock shut, one of those sounds that lands in your chest, crisp and sure. I zip-tied the deed, the buffer letter, the no trespassing placard in eye-level order, and stuck a bright arrow under the line in the title report that says outside HOA boundaries. Then I set a stack of one-page handouts in a clear box. Private Propertino Event Public Beach 1 mile east. Toby launched his drone from his porch, and the little machine hummed like a big mosquito as it rose, framed the road, and waited. The first minivan arrived at 8:37. A family I didn't recognize, Mom behind the wheel chewing a straw, Dad squinting at the sign, 2 teenagers pretending not to care, and I walked up slow, held out the handouts, kept my voice gentle. This part wasn't their fault. The community day got advertised at the wrong address. I said, public beach is straight. Then right, great parking, you'll be happier there. And the mom read the page, color rising in her face, and said, they told us it was all approved. And I smiled like a person who's been lied about, and said, I know. They turned around without honking. A pickup rolled up next, the rental company's logo on the door. Driver shook his head when he saw the lock. I told them I needed proof of venue, he said. Told them I wasn't unloading a single folding chair without it. And he snapped a photo and drove off, dust lifting like a curtain. At 9:20, a white SUV eased up, slow as a sermon, and Marla stepped out in a linen blazer that looked like it had never touched a hanger, Rex unfolding from the passenger side with a clipboard and a smirk. She looked at the chain like it had insulted her personally. Evan, she said, each syllable polished. This isn't neighborly, and I nodded toward the laminated papers. That's the neighborly part, I said. I figured you'd want the reading at eye level. She smiled without showing teeth. We've already paid deposits, food, music, a bounce houseito. You really want those vendors to lose money because you won't be flexible? I just held her gaze, let the pause widen until the weeds started singing, and said, I want you to stop telling people you own what you don't. Rex took a step like he meant to reach for the chain, and Toby's drone tilted down just enough to make a shadow slide across Rex's shoes. Careful, I said, still calm. That camera's got a good lawyer. Marla's eyes flicked upward, quick and annoyed, and for the first time I saw a calculation slipping, the story she'd written for herself fraying at the edges. She switched tactics. We could make a donation to your little bird project, she said, crisp as paper. Call it a partnership. And I felt a laugh start low in my chest because the owls don't take bribes and neither do I. Tell you what, I said. You donate to the public beach cleanup fund, write an apology to every vendor you misled, and you stop using my address like a prop, then maybe you can keep whatever dignity you brought with you this morning. For a second, nobody breathed. Then a county SUV rolled up, and Ranger Keegan stepped out with a clipboard and a tape measure. He greeted me by name, nodded to the documents, and measured the right-of-way like a man counting rosary beads, precise, polite, unbothered by eyebrows. Denton, he said, there's no authorization for an event here and no jurisdictional authority for your board on this parcel. So I'm going to log this as resolvedno access granted, private use only. And when he wrote the words on his form, the sound of his pen made my scalp tingle, because sometimes justice comes dressed like paperwork, not a trumpet. Word got around faster than light moves in fog. Vendors began posting on the neighborhood page. No verified venue. Withdrawing. Deposit refunded pending board review. Policy disallows coverage misrepresentation suspected. Parents who had been packing coolers were suddenly commenting things like, "We'll see everyone at the public beach." And then, in a turn that felt like a breeze through a hot room, a couple of HOA members asked why the board had announced a venue without proof names weren't named, but the shape of the finger pointed just the same. Marla stood there, still pretending her shoes weren't getting dusty, and said, "You'll regret this, Evan." And I said, "Only if I forget it, and I won't." They left without slamming the doors. Toby's drone followed their roofline halfway up Ridge Road, then floated back toward the cove like a dragonfly that had lost interest. The lake exhaled. "You did it," she said, and I wanted to be humble, to say the chain did it or the paperwork did it. But the truth is I did it because somewhere along the way I forgot to be scared of people who talk like rules or suggestions. In the afternoon, a string of screenshots landed on my phone board messages, polite but sharp, asking about deposits and bylaw language and whether the president had exceeded authority by promising an off-map venue. By Sunday night, there was a brief note on the HOA site, leadership transition pending. No names, of course, but Riverton's a small enough place that you can hear a resignation without anyone saying the word. The Owls came back that night, a barred pair calling across the cove like a duet that got good again, and I sat on the dock with a bourbon and that feeling you get when a long nail finally slides into the wood straight relief, and a tiny ring of satisfaction that echoes out past the things you can name. I sent the Ranger's note to the Grand office to show the research wasn't compromised, backed up the week's recordings twice, and took one last look at the gate before bed. It looked almost pretty in the moonlight, that chain, like a necklace on a throat that can finally breathe. Maybe that's the part that sticks with meth quiet afterward, the way boundaries can make room for kindness once you defend them, because the next day when I drove into town the rental guy tipped his hat and said, "Right call." And the clerk at the store said, "I checked my property line last night." And even Rex, of all people, kept his eyes on the cereal when we passed in the aisle. A week later, the HOA adopted a new Relino event advertisement without a letter from the property owner on file. Board votes required for venue contracts, and that probably won't make a movie, but around here it's what passes for reform, and I'll take it. So, was it harsh to lock the gate, to print the papers and zip-tie the truth at eye level, to stare down a blazer and a clipboard and say no with my whole chester? Was that exactly what keeps a neighborhood honest when power gets hungry and people forget the shape of a line on a map? Tell me where you stand. Tell me if you've ever had to guard the edge of what's yours. Tell me whether community means consent or conquest where you live. Drop your story in the comments. Argue with each other if you have to, just keep it civil, and if you want more tales where paperwork beats pressure and quiet wins the day, share this video, send it to the friend who's fighting their own small battle, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next stand we make right here on this doc.